the Goob here with another episode of Rewriting History with me, the Goob. So this week I'm talking about the vases again and the case that they make for ancient high technology. A couple updates before I get into that. I did start a Patreon. The link is in the description. And the plan is to keep this show as it is, doing an hour live call-in show every Sunday. And yeah, that's going to stay the same. And then when I have a smaller update, just a rant I want to go on, something that doesn't really fit into the theme of a show, maybe it's an update of something else I've covered before, that will go on the Patreon. So more sporadic, shorter content on the Patreon. I've got a rant today linking the North Carolina floods, what's going on in there, to, the cover-up of history. So if that fits into the time slot, I'll just include that in today's show. Otherwise, that'll be a Patreon video. So, sign up if you want to see that. And I've got 10 slots that are $1 a month. And I think Patreon lets you pay for a year at a time with a little bit of a discount. So it's like $10 for a year of my Patreon. So yeah, if you want even more of the Goob, there is a way to get even more of the Goob. And feel free to join the Discord, talk to me there. I'll interact with you. So there was definitely something else I wanted to cover before I got into the vases, but such is life. So these vases, I've talked about them last week. I've talked about them before. My position on them has gradually changed. I started, as conservatively as I possibly could and declared that hand tools were out of the question. But, maybe a simple lathe really is all that's needed for this. And the more I've learned about our machining abilities today, and just looked into this whole issue, the more solidly I am concluding that these are absolute evidence of high technology. And I have not touched on at all the interior of these vases, which is also worked, very precisely. So you have the exterior and you have the handles, which are an enigma. But I haven't even touched on the interior. So I don't have an image of the vase pulled up, but here I have measurements of some of the vases. This is coming from Ben, Uncharted X. In the thin vase, I'll see if Google Images will show me the thin vase if I Google it, because it's definitely one of the more impressive vases. I think it's that one in the center, potentially. You can see here that the measurements are not in thousandths of an inch, but in 10,000ths of an inch here. The thin vase is incredibly precise. And the inside is also incredibly precise. It's so thin. Here's an image here where they're displaying its ability to, you can see through it. You can shine a light in it. Let's see if that, there you go. So you can see Luke Caverns there shining a light into this vase, and the light is shining back outside of it because the vase has been thinned out from the interior so much that, and it's got a very consistent wall thickness going through the entire thing. So not only is the outside of this perfect within, 10,000th of an inch, but the inside of this, I don't think they've gotten measurements like that on the inside, but it's precise enough that you have, you can see through it. This is really, really, really significant because we don't do this today. We just don't. I think that there's some subtle distinctions to be made here, right? Because I do think we are capable of doing this today in the regards that if aliens came to the planet right now, and we're like, you need to recreate that thin vase. The best one that's been scanned so far is that thin vase, as far as I'm aware. There is a very recent update I might touch on that might be even more precise, like talking in the micron region, which is insane if that actually is the case. It might be some data, selective data, not data fudging, but selective data choosing. So I want to wait for more to come out on that. But there might be vases like measuring within microns of perfection. But if aliens came down and were like, you need to recreate that thin vase, you have a week to do so, or else we blow up the planet, I guarantee we'd have that vase made, right? But when you look at what we are currently doing, this is well beyond anything we are doing today. And these vases have been a subject of high interest for a couple years now. And there have been many people that have come forward going, hey, I've got a lathe. I can do this. I can make one of these vases. I'm going to make one of these vases and show you that it's possible today. There have been many people that have come out and made statements like that. Some of them, 2-3 years ago, many of them 1 year ago when the vases really picked up. And to date, I have not seen a single one of these people who made these claims actually come forward with a vase. You have the vase made by Scientists Against Myths, which was made by hand tools, and it's a beautiful vase. I covered it on the channel, and like I said, it was her very first attempt, and in some ways it looks even better than the Predynastic vase that she was trying to copy. So really, really impressive, but also very clearly a totally different category of production. It was, a bird vase. It was beautiful and impressive, but it just was not this precision stuff. So it's really hard to make direct comparisons when covering this subject because direct comparisons don't exist. They just don't exist. And if you listen to Matt Bell, who's the guy who's collecting all of these vases, he's buying up all these vases off of the market. He claims, and I haven't seen any proof of this, it might be out there on his Twitter somewhere, but he claims that he has gone to people who are working granite, people who are turning granite on lathes and stuff like that, and he's tried to commission one of these ancient vases to these ancient, specifications, and he's been told that they can't, right? So this is anecdotal. I'm taking Matt's word for it, but I am taking Matt's word for it because it's matching up with everything I'm seeing in my own research. It's not like we don't work granite today, but we don't work granite like that. And I'm going to cover what might seem like semantics and like really subtle differences, but they're really significant. You cannot cut granite. You can't cut granite. You can't mill granite. When we are turning steel or aluminum or marble on a lathe, and if you really want to get into semantics, you're not necessarily cutting the marble either, right? But what you can do with those materials, you just can't do with granite. You can take, a mill, essentially a drill bit, right? And you spin it up and you can just run that through a piece of steel. You can just carve out a path and cut out a path and you'll get long, strings of steel coming off. You can't do that with granite. It's strictly abrasives. Like you're using grit and just a lot of friction to wear away the granite. And because we can spin things really, really fast, we can wear away that granite pretty quickly. But that's all you can do with granite. You can't, with marble, you take a nice hardened steel tip, a nice pointy hardened steel tip, and you apply that to the marble spinning on the lathe, and it's just going to carve away a nice, path wherever you stick that pointy hardened steel tip. It'll just shave away that marble. You cannot do that with granite. It just doesn't work that way. We don't have the material science to do something like that with granite. You can only just grind away and abrade the granite. So this becomes pretty significant when you're dealing with something like this, where the interior is also hollowed out. I've tried to get, things to compare to, and I think this is the video I'm looking for. This video is a granite cup. I'm going to skip ahead quite a bit. This part isn't really significant. I'm getting to where, okay, let's go back just a wee bit. Add. All right, so he's about to put this thing on the lathe. Jesus Christ, I should have checked this before. But all right, he's got his piece on a lathe, and that's a very tiny little rotary bit. But again, he's using a rotary bit to, you know, grind away the granite here. You can't just cut it or apply a cutting tool and, you know, carve it that way like you can other materials. It's just too hard to do that. And I chose this video because at the end of it here, somewhere along here, he starts hollowing out the inside, and you can see the method he's using to do this. He's using a series of tube drills, of differently sized tube drills, to cut into it, and he's doing this repeatedly, you know, going an inch at a time or something like that, you know, with all these different sized tube drills to try and hollow it out. And this does not have a smaller neck on it than, you know, like the vases. Some of the vases are very wide bodied. I'll show you some pictures in a minute. Some of the vases are very, very wide bodied with tiny little necks, and they are also hollowed out from the inside. So you can see the techniques he's using here, right? The series of tube drills, because you just cannot, you can't just like put a cutting bit in there and, you know, carve it away. You see here he's using, again, abrasives. It's basically sandpaper. It is sandpaper on a stick, and he's using that to shape it a bit and polish it up, really. I think he's just polishing it up, not shaping it. The tube drill did that. But this is the closest comparison I could get to one of the vases. As far as, you know, a hollowed out something here, let's take a final look at the cup at the end of the video here. Look at that beautiful cup. I think the interior is straight edged, right? So it's not even forming to the shape of this cup. And this was the closest I could get as a reference. We just aren't doing that. What you see in these dynastic vases, pre-dynastic vases, we just aren't doing that. It's just not something that's done. I completely believe that Matt did go to people who are, you know, making granite vases and things like that and tried to get them to make a vase to these specifications, and they just went, we can't. That seems to match up exactly with what I'm seeing. The majority of granite work being done today is done in China, and I had a bunch of videos. They're all shorts. They're all short. So I had a bunch of videos to show you how we work granite today. My computer will not play shorts. It just gives me green lines across the videos. So I can't show you any of them, but you can look them up online. Like there's videos of them making granite spheres, big granite spheres. It's pretty cool. The way that they do it is they turn the lathe very, very slowly, and then they have a giant circular saw going in, and they cut fins on it, right? A series of cuts next to each other. And then they knock off those fins, and you have a roughly spherical shaped ball. And then they just continue with that circular saw, getting closer and closer to the shape of a sphere until it's, you know, close enough that they can polish it down with some abrasives. But again, you're not just like carving granite. You're not just cutting granite. Like, this is an important distinction to make, because you can do that with marble. You can do that with steel. You can do that with aluminum. You can do that with all the other materials that we turn on lathes. You cannot do that with granite. It really is that much different of a material. We just don't have the material science to do that with granite. All right. So this is on a slightly different route. This is just showing the preparation for a cutting tool that is about to be used in a precision, you know, very high-tech lathe, right? And it's going through this whole process of tempering and heat treating and cooling and spinning to make sure it's perfectly centered and everything. So all of this is just what they do to the drill bit before they put it on the lathe. Just to give you an idea of like how we achieve these levels of precision today, it's not just this simple process. So like that idea of, you know, that Dan puts forward with that bouncing around lathe producing these vases, it's just absolutely ridiculous. these vases are not only proof of technology that at least matches our own, but it very clearly exceeds our own. Again, if aliens came down and said, make this vase or die, we're making the vase, right? We do, I fully believe we have the ability to make these vases, but it's not practical for us. We never have made these vases. We never would make these vases because it's way too difficult. Is it within the realm of possibility for humanity? Yes, but it's not in the realm of anything that anyone would ever do because it's so impractical. Let's see. Let's look at some of this other stuff I got. So this is. I really wish I could show you some of the other videos. I might try. But this is just an idea of how, again, it's emphasizing that you can't just cut this stuff. You can't just carve this stuff. You can look at the methods they're using here. It's a series of very slow, using abrasives, you know, using friction to cut away fins and then chip them off and shape this into, you know, what ends up being a very beautiful piece of art. But let me speed this up, put it on double speed here, because it's a little slow. But yeah, they're just cutting away pieces even for these curved surfaces. You've got this fancy CNC machine. This is one of those fancy CNC machines. You know, that can rotate and cut at all different angles and cut. You see how it's cutting around the head on curved surfaces. So this is how we would do this with a fancy computerized CNC machine today. You're not carving these stones. You're not cutting these stones. You are slowly abrading these stones. And, you know, eventually you can make some pretty skipping through this to get, you know, a better idea of the end product. Looks like they're using corundum there, you know, to spinning a little corundum sphere disc thing, grinding away, and you end up with this evil looking goat thing. But that's how we do that today. And you know, this really does. I've made the argument before that, like, you can work granite with copper, but the impressiveness of the statues that you see there, to me, it speaks to something else. And these vases are undeniable that they were turned on a very, very high-tech lathe. Like, I don't know. I wish I'm not the best presenter. I know it seems like I probably don't prepare for this show a lot, but I really do. I don't write a script for this show because I've said I'm kind of retarded. When it comes to writing, I am fully retarded. Like, there is actually something wrong with my brain where when I try to translate thoughts or verbal speech to text, like, there's that connection just doesn't exist. It just, I'm not able to write. I go fully retarded when I try to write anything. So I don't write a script, but I do prepare a lot. Like, I think through all of the arguments. I straw man and steel man and come up with counterpoints, and like, I really do prepare quite a bit for these episodes. But I'm not necessarily the strongest presenter, and I'm not going off of any notes. So I often forget a lot of the points I want to make, which is why I have this part of the reason why I have this set up as a call-in show is because, like, I'm a really great debater. Really great at debating. So it's like all of the thoughts and arguments are in my head and they are ready to come out as soon as they're prompted by something, right? So it's like if I was having a conversation with someone about the vases, I would sound really, really intelligent. I would really know what I'm talking about. But just trying to just present it, I struggle. I'm still learning how to do that and get better at it. Hopefully I can get better at it because I don't like where I'm at with it now. I need to be better at it. But yeah, Mr. G, it might just be you and me again. But there is absolutely no comparison for these vases that exist today. Here are some statues, some granite statues made in America handmade with power tools, of course, but handmade, not with a lathe. And you can take a look through this website, memorials.com, and see the quality that they've got going on here. I'm going to pull up the Michelangelo's Pieta statue here, and let's just take a look at it, okay? This is what they're using as a display on their website, so I imagine this is like the best version they got. I imagine they take a picture of the best one they have. You can order another one, and they'll make another one for you. But this over here, that's supposed to be a hand. That's Mary's hand. This is Jesus. He doesn't even have toes. There's just no toes there. They just gave up on the toes. This is the level of granite statues that you get today. Here's the actual Pieta, which is marble, so totally different. Again, I'm not trying to bash the artist over here or anything, but like compare this to what you see in ancient Egypt. This is the hand on this statue. There's the hand on this statue. So, absolutely, I mean, this might be the finest sculpture in the world that exists. I think you could definitely make a case for it. Then you got this, right? And not trying to shit on this guy. It is impressive work. I couldn't do that. But you compare what we're doing in granite today to the ancient statues of Egypt, the absolutely flawless statues of Egypt that are carved out of granite. Ramses has hundreds of them. And Ramses, again, is 3,000 years ago. The Great Pyramids, 4,500 years ago. The Triads of Menkaure, which actually the Triads of Menkaure might even give like Pieta a run for their money, and they're in granite. Those are 4,500 years ago, almost 5,000 years ago. So I don't know. I think this technology seems to pop up a couple of times throughout Egypt and other parts of the world. It is really hard for me to justify those statues through the tools that are ascribed to the ancient Egyptians. And it's absolutely impossible for me to ascribe these vases to the tools, that the ancient Egyptians supposedly made them with. So I have a paper that I found today. I haven't even read this, and I think this paper is probably debunking the argument that I've made, but it has a lot of really cool pictures nonetheless. So I'm going to go through here. Not all of these are pre-dynastic vases. There's a mix, as you saw in the title there. It's a mix of vases throughout time in Egypt. This is, God, my computer is being retarded right now. I can't, it's just jumping all over. All right, sorry, fellas. But this vase here, Christ, I'm taking the Lord's name in vain, my bad. This is a more recent vase. This is not pre-dynastic. I don't know if this is alabaster or a different, but also soft material. All of the more recent vases are in softer materials. Some of them are really, really impressive, like the one you saw above. This looks like one of those pre-dynastic vases. Not 100% sure, though, because there are some very impressive vases from later periods. This looks like alabaster. That's an alabaster vase, possibly from the time of the Great Pyramids. Very impressive, very beautiful. Still a totally different category than these pre-dynastic vases that we're talking about. These, again, very impressive. I don't think these are necessarily... it's in basalt. Basalt's quite hard to work. And these are attributed to pre-dynastic times. I've never seen, those vases or even those types of vases presented. This is obviously imperfect. Is this also pre-dynastic? No, this is the Nikeda period, so this is after. Ben would say this was an attempt to imitate those vases, and I would probably agree with him. And you can see this is clearly lopsided. It's clearly not perfect. It's really impressive. I mean, it's balancing on this rounded end here. Like, that is impressive work, and I wonder if the inside of that is also hollowed out or if it's just a straight tube drill. I'd love to know. Can't see from that image. It might be in the text here. like I said, I haven't read this yet. Even from those images, it's hard to tell if that's a straight drill or if it's hollowed out. I think it might be hollowed out. Really impressive, but this looks like someone using the types of tools ascribed to ancient Egyptians. It doesn't at all look like that thin vase that is having deviations measured in 10,000ths of an inch and is so thin that you can literally see through it. You can shine a light through it. Again, these, these are, well, predynastic early Nikeda, so not necessarily the predynastic same period as these vases. These are really interesting. These are the thumbnail for this video, and these are not round. These are flat flasks. This is a later flask. These two are predynastic. I don't know how perfect or imperfect these are or aren't. I don't know if these come, fit in the same category or not, but they're really interesting because they are pretty beautiful. They're porphyry, diorite, and serpentine. So diorite, extremely hard, right? This one is diorite. This is porphyry, which is fairly hard. I don't know how perfect these are, but really interesting that you have this flat flask shape. They're squished. They're flat on it's hard to tell from these images, but they're flat on this face and flat on the back, and then, ovular. So those are really fascinating. Have you guys ever heard anything about these before, seen these at all before? I hadn't. There's a lot of very interesting vases out there, and I haven't seen them. So Matt Bell has an image of a vase that, or he has the vase. He physically has the vase, but it's got the handles going all the way around, and it's not just a whole rim around. It's not an unbroken rim, but you have instead of two handles, it's you have the blanks because they don't have any holes drilled in them yet. But you have it's like a dozen or something, equally spaced all the way around. One of those vases. I had never seen that before either. That was really interesting. I don't have an image of it pulled up. But yeah, I mean, a lot of very, very interesting vases here that I'd never seen before. A lot of these look very similar, but some of them look quite different. And you can clearly see that some of these just aren't the same level of precision that, the vases that Ben is talking about are. This is travertine, or one of the ones up there is travertine. Doesn't seem to say what this one is, but travertine's about a 4 or a 5 on the Mohs hardness scale. Alabaster's a 3, marble's a 3, right? So it's a little bit harder, but still relatively soft. Still something that you can carve. That's diorite. And it's hard to tell from this picture because parts of this look pretty darn perfect. Those handles look really, really precise. The sides look pretty precise. Maybe it's just the angle it's taken at, but it looks like the top over here is higher than over here. That might just be the angle. But if that's a later recreation, I mean, that's really, really well done. And this is late Nikeda period. So that would be after the, 5,000-year-old pre-dynastic vases. So if that's a recreation, without high technology, man, that is very, very impressive. I'd love to get actual numbers on this thing, readings on this thing. And that's another thing is that there just isn't, you just don't see that kind of stuff for a lot of this stuff that's made. I showed on my show quite a while ago a video, which I'll try and pull up again real quick, of a dude turning this huge piece of granite on a huge lathe. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick because, yeah, this video right here, very impressive stuff. And you don't get any numbers on this stuff. I have no idea how many thousandths of an inch this deviates or doesn't deviate. But there is something that I have been doing as a very poor man's stand-in for checking the precision of things, and that's watching the light reflect off the surfaces. So let's go all the way to the end of this video here where he's showing it off. And as you see it rotate, you can see the light wobble. You can also watch videos of these ancient predynastic vases and see how much the light wobbles on them as they rotate. And no, it's not a perfect comparison, but it does give you an idea. You can see it wobbling down there as it goes around. This thing is a beautiful piece of granite. It's also a 500-pound piece of granite. So this is apples to oranges already. But you can do this with other pieces as well. You can look at granite vases that have been produced by modern CNC machines. You can, compare things in this way because you're just not getting like that data on these types of things. This guy didn't put calipers on this thing, right? Or if he did, he didn't share that information. So it is really hard to make these comparisons, but this is something that I've been doing as a way to, roughly check. And I can say that the majority of these predynastic vases, the wobble in the light is a lot less than what you see in modern objects. So, as a poor man's substitute. But just some fascinating vases, especially those flat flasks. I had never seen those before. I thought those were really, really interesting. And really impressive. And obviously those can't be turned on a lathe. Obviously this kind of stuff can't be turned on a lathe, but I don't think these were. Like, these are dynastic Egyptian vases. You see, this is just a straight, I'm fairly confident on this, that this is just a straight drill down through there. It's not hollowed out. You can visibly see these are far less perfect. And some of them are more impressive, like this one is a bit more impressive, but it's still visibly imperfect. And then you compare it, that sure looks pretty darn good just from that photo. We're only working with one photo, so it's hard to make these analysis like this off of individual photos. But yeah. So the only two arguments that are made against these vases seriously are that the data is being lied about. Just like Dan's not the only one who's made that claim. Plenty of people have made the claim that these vases are not as precise as actually presented by Ben and their team. Because look at these vases. Like, there's plenty of vases here that are not nearly as precise. So they're making the whole argument of, oh, so you just happen to get the most precise vases and scan the most precise vases. All of these other ones are clearly imperfect from a visual inspection, but you happen to get these perfect ones? Yeah, no, you're lying about the data. So that's one argument. Well, if you listen to Ben, if you listen to Matt, if you listen to the people who are acquiring these vases and testing these vases, they very specifically say that they are choosing the most perfect looking vases. They aren't just scanning random predynastic vases. They're going to the predynastic vases, and then they're going, man, this one, I see no flaws in it. This one looks perfect to me. Let's see just how perfect it is. So, no, it's not just a coincidence. They're not just randomly choosing vases. They're specifically picking the ones that look the most perfect to them. And why are there imperfect vases? There's a lot of potential explanations for that, even if they were using high technology to produce these things. There's a lot of potential explanations for that. The other argument is that the vases are modern. These are the only two attacks that anyone has on these vases. The data's fake, or the vases are modern. The ancient, nature of these vases is fake. These vases were excavated in the 1950s, and people make the argument that, well, we could have made these in the 1950s, and maybe we could have. Maybe. Again, no one would have, no one did, because it would have been a monumental task, but like theoretically, maybe we could have. But if these were pumped out in the 1950s just so people could make a quick buck selling these things, why has nobody made one since? Where is its modern counterpart? It's been 70 years. Surely we could make these things easier today. And I made this argument in the beginning of the stream that, like, a lot of people came forward going, hey, I'm going to make one of these. I'm going to prove you guys wrong. I'm going to show you just how easy it is to make one of these. I've got a lathe. I'm going to go turn one of these. And not a single one of those people, since saying that, has, to my knowledge, actually come forward with a vase. we have all of this modern technology. These vases are getting a lot of attention. No one has a modern counterpart for them. Still, people are still making the arguments that these could have been made in the 1950s, that the provenance or provenance, whatever it is, isn't valid, that these are actually modern forgeries. Great. If they were made in the 1950s, make one today. Show us one from today. And the data being fake is just nonsense. You can watch it yourself. They have videos of them taking the calipers and doing this, like, not live, but, right there, unedited, no cuts in the video. So, despite Dan just blatantly lying and other people making these claims, it's bullshit. The measurements are real. The vases truly are an astonishing level of precision. And they have to make those arguments, right? Because if they acknowledge that these are actually ancient vases and they actually are as precise as they are claimed to be, they're undeniable proof of high technology. There's a good reason why those are the two arguments that the people who are anti-high technology for the vases, they are desperately clinging to those two arguments still, because they're the only arguments that they have. Because if these vases are real, if the precision is real, it's undeniable proof of high technology. Feel free to call in, fellas. I think you've only got 2 minutes, so make it quick if you want. But if you want to call in, I can start a StreamYard. Otherwise, I mean, I've covered what I wanted to cover. I don't know if I've presented it convincingly to you guys or not. I couldn't show a lot of the stuff I wanted to show because they're YouTube shorts, and my computer just won't play them. But everything I have seen just continues to strengthen the idea that these are only possible through, like, really sophisticated high technology, well beyond a simple lathe. And I haven't even really addressed the idea of the handles either. I've talked about the handles. I've talked about how they aren't capable, you can't do that on a lathe. But, like, I haven't addressed how they were actually done because I don't know. Ben, says a 5-axis CNC machine. And, like, honestly, I don't have a better explanation. Like, that seems pretty plausible, a 5-axis CNC machine. I don't know how else you do it. So when you start taking into account the interiors that have been perfectly hollowed out, like, look how wide this is. You see the entrance here, right? You can see how crisp the underside is there. It follows the curve of this thing. That you can't just put a cutting edge in there and cut away at it. Like I was explaining earlier, you can't do that. You have to abrade that. You have to have, like, some other, like that guy who was making the sculpture and he had that tiny little corundum, ball that he was going in with it to do the detail works. Like, you have to have some type of, like, rotary thing like that you can put within the lip, within that hole up there, and then even potentially an articulating thing to get these types of angles. To have that, be flat underneath there like that and then follow this curve. Like, you have to have an articulating, rotating, grinding bit to produce that. That's pretty nutso. Like, how else are you producing that? You're not. You're just not. I don't know. So, oh, that's cool, Slav. Yeah, she's a hottie. I wouldn't expect anything less. Does she have the Khazar milkers? I don't have a brand to protect on my stream, but that might not be good for the brand. Yeah, man. Yeah. It's all about the Moes here. It is all about the Moes. Yeah. So the issue with a pottery wheel is just like the tolerances. Yeah, metal and wood, totally different. Um, so you think the handles were added after? So you're going like stone softening and um, geopolymer, right? Maybe, but yeah. So the issue with a pottery wheel or a simple lathe, right, is that you have that thin vase, and the tolerances on that thing are within the 10,000th of an inch, within 10,000ths of an inch. Like I think it was 8/10,000ths of an inch, so less than 1/1000th of an inch. You're just not getting those tolerances on something like a pottery wheel or something like a simple lathe. Um, it, it's just not happening. You need a very, very, very tight tolerance, precise lathe, like very high precision lathe to get that. So yeah, again, I don't think you're getting those tolerances through sandblasting. I don't know enough about sandblasting really to say that definitively, but are you really getting this type of shape and tolerances by blasting it with sand? I don't know. And if you are doing sandblasting, like that's high technology. You need a lot of force, a lot of air power for that sand to actually do anything to that, these corundum and diorite and granite that these vases are made out of. So it's like you're still dealing with high technology. Yeah, and yeah, that's kind of what I would assume is that sandblasting is an approximate art, and these are very, very, very precise. Sandblasting also doesn't explain the interiors. So, I was comfortable making these statements about high technology before even considering the interiors. And it's not like I didn't ever consider them. It's just like there's enough just on the exterior of these vases. They're precise enough. The materials are hard enough, like the handles as well. But even without the handles, there's a really, really, really strong, I would almost say overwhelmingly strong case to be made for high technology, just analyzing the outsides of these things. And then when you start looking at stuff like this, stuff like the thin vase, where the insides are also precision machined and to a consistent thickness and everything, we don't do this today. We cannot do this today. Again, aliens pull a gun to the head of the entire earth. I promise you we are doing this today, right? So it is theoretically possible, but as far as what anyone in the world actually is doing, we cannot do this today. The vases, go look up any granite vase today, and the interior is just a straight tube drill. There is not a granite vase that you're going to find that has a hollowed out interior. You do find that with marble vases, because marble is so much softer, you can just put, some like a cutting edge into the hole at the top, and you can carve away that inside. So we do that with things like marble. We don't do that with things like granite. You're just not going to find it. Yeah, and I don't want to get too carried away talking about the interiors because as far as I know, there haven't been like precise measurements made on the interiors. You can see inside of some of them on some of these videos, and like they're not polished, right? I think the thin vase actually is polished on the interior. Could be wrong on that. But like most of these vases, they're not like fully polished on the inside. They're not fully finished. You can see small ridges, where they have been cutting and like they didn't completely grind away the ridges in between. I don't know how perfect these interiors are or aren't. I think the thin vase, the interior might be pretty damn perfect and like polished, like I said. But other than that one, the interiors on a lot of these things aren't, to the same standards as the outside. But I just don't know. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen measurements of it. So I don't want to, say the insides are perfect and then they get measured and it's like, oh yeah, they're actually off by like 1/8 of an inch, but they're still hollowed out. It's still impressive. Because I don't know. But even if they are off by 1/8 of an inch, stuff like that, like it's still a problem. It's still a question. that like we still don't do that today, whether it be off by an eighth of an inch or whatever. We just don't do that today. It's not something that is done because it's too difficult to do. It's not practical. So I'm going to go and head over to the Patreon content, which I don't think anyone signed up yet because I just introduced it at the beginning of this video. But Patreon is down in the description. So if you want to hear me rant on what's going on in North Carolina right now and compare that and, you know, draw parallels to the cover-up of history and the erasure of history and the conspiracy that's going on there, sign up to the Patreon. It's $1 a month for the first 10 people to sign up. So $10 a year if you get it a year at a time. Yeah. Peace out, fellas. I will catch you next week. And I'll see maybe some of you on the Patreon.